Señor, ¿listo?
Yep.
Let's do this. Señor, just like I was saying, I'm extremely excited about today. Excited that you accepted my invite.
Absolutely.
I knew it that you were going to be sharp at 7 p.m. because I know you already. And I'm just so glad that we're making this happen. So thank you so much
You're
again.
very welcome. It's my pleasure.
No, Señor, thank you. There's so many topics, so many things that I definitely want to ask. I want to get into your mindset. I want to get best practices myself. And I know that the audience that is watching or hearing, of course, they're going to also take a lot of value from this. So let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
For those that maybe are not familiar with who Tommy Gonzalez is, tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and what is it that you do.
Okay, well, so I was born and raised on the east side of Lubbock, Texas. I always preface that by saying the east side because it wasn't the very good part of town. It was a bad part of town. I went to probably the not the best school in Parkway Elementary School. It's probably the worst school in the city. And then I went to junior high at Alderson and then kind of moved around. The bottom line, we grew up very poor. I remember running out of food like on Wednesday and not getting food till my dad got paid on Friday at noon. And I remember going with my mom to go pick up the check and then going to the store. And I just remember bologna and cheese and Doritos and Kool-Aid. And it was the best meal to eat that whenever you skip a day of not eating. And so I know what it feels like to be hungry, but at the same time know how it feels to have a great family, to be loved by your mom and dad, and the fact that they had priorities for us. They had a plan. They didn't go to school, so they wanted all of us to go to school. So she had a plan to do that. And I remember when I wanted to play football, she did not want to let me play. And my dad said, let him play. And my mom was like, she was very aggressive with my dad and was like, well, if he gets hurt, it's going to be your fault. And she just said a lot of bad things to him. And anyway, they let me play and ended up getting a scholarship playing football in college. And I was being looked at by scouts, tore up my knee. That's when the ROTC instructor came over and talked a lot of the football players into being, in military men to get in the military. And so we did. We got in the military, and I know I was there 22 years, retired as a lieutenant colonel. And also just throughout my career in city management, have worked in 4 other cities. I started in the city of Lubbock. I was the only person that looked like me. Everybody else was a little bit more light complected than myself, but I was the only brown spot. And a lot of people thought, well, he got the job for, they'd say a lot of things. He got it because he played football. He got it because, the white people like him. Just a lot of different bad comments like that. And so I really felt like I needed to prove myself. So every time I was given a task, I would do it the best that I could. And I always would give more than what was asked of me. And, I remember having 14 positions in 13 years. So they really trained me really well in city management. And when the city manager resigned and they made me interim in that first year, we lowered the taxes by 10 pennies. We passed the sales tax. We did a lot of firsts, and I just didn't get the job. It was 1 vote short. My wife didn't want us to stay. She said, you've done, you've run this city. You've done a great job, and we don't need to stay here. So we went to Harlingen. I thought, if I can't run the city I grew up in, I'll run the city my dad grew up in. He grew up in Harlingen, Texas, and South Texas. So I was there a couple of years, and I went to the city of Dallas as a deputy city manager, and then to Irving as the city manager for 8 years, and then I've been here 7. So, I've worked for everything that I've got, and I have put everything into what I do. And when I learned how to shape cities, and I learned that in Lubbock with Jim Bertram, who was a strategic planning guru. I learned everything, a lot of what I know, mostly everything about strategic planning from him, and I'm really good at it now because I've done it for a very long time in cities, and the military has reinforced that, strategic planning and management by objectives. So I really, had very few people that I can be able to say that I leaned on them and they taught me things. Jim Bertram is one of them. I didn't have true mentors like other people have, so I've made mistakes in doing what I do in city management, But having learned from all those experiences, I bring that here to El Paso, and the ways to shape a city, to change a city for the better. I believe we've done some of that here, and it's been a little bit about everything that I've had as I've grown up that I've brought here to the table, and I see myself in El Paso, and I see El Paso in me, and vice versa. There's a lot of challenges here. A lot of people think certain things about El Paso, just like people think certain things about me. And I know El Paso is where it's at because it's worked for what it has, just like all of us have. So my story is not that much different from a lot of El Pasoans. I just wasn't born here. But my dad crossed when he was 4, and a lot of people don't know that. And so I tell people all the time, I could be in Mexico right now, because his mother crossed. She was from Venezuela, and so they crossed. And my mom, her dad was Indian, and her mom was from Spain. So when we did the Paseo de las Luces in downtown, that meant the world to me, because that was a connection to my dad. And we lost my dad in 2016. So when we were able to do Paseo de las Luces, I told that story about him crossing, and about how we're all connected, and that borders. Everybody talks about borders, and yes, borders do provide security and safety, but at the same time, the way we're set up with Juarez, it's part of our community. We're part of theirs, and it helps our economy. Our economy helps their economy, and so we're one region, and that's how I see it in terms of how it works. It's no different than North Texas, where you have all the suburbs around you. We just happen to have a big suburb or a big city as part of our suburb with Juarez. And we're actually the small city compared to them, because they're much larger than we are. So we operate as one region.
Nice, Senor. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because again, we definitely gonna talk about city management, some of the steps you have taken, accomplishments that you have been able and your team have done throughout these 7 years. But I'm very interested. Are you looking back at all your accomplishments? Do you sometimes look back and feel proud about yourself, like all the things that you have done? You have a very impressive resume, by the way. So I'm just, as I was doing a lot of research on you, I'm like, I wonder if Tommy looks back and says, wow, I've been able to do all these things,
The way I look at the things that have been done in the past, we to be able to harness everyone's energy and get everyone on the same page and get them all moving in the same direction, that's what I value, because that is the time that you're able to move mountains, literally. You're able to change things. The things that I can tell you that have been done in other cities are very similar to what we've done here. Everybody talks about downtown, and the city only focused on downtown. So what did we do? We focused on the Northeast. We focused on the Far East. We're focused in the Mission Valley. And now you've got things in all of those parts of town. People can't say that we're just focusing on downtown. At the same time, when we do something in downtown, we were able to leverage a state sales tax rebate for hotels, something that goes to the state and the city doesn't see. We did that in the city of Irving, and we were able to create the Irving Music Factory. That's a big development in the urban center there in Las Colinas. So we were able to do that here with these hotels. The plaza was just a shell. It was gutted. The Camino Real was, you tell me what it was like. Everybody said it was dilapidated and it had seen better days. And so you've got those two hotels that have been renovated, rejuvenated. You have the Paseo de las Luces, that's just a cherry on top. You've got San Jacinto, that's our Central Park. You have the hotel, Marriott Courtyard, brand new hotel coming out of the ground. Hadn't happened in half a century to have a brand new hotel come out of the ground in downtown. And all that's fueled by the state sales tax, not just our money, but millions upon millions of dollars from the state. So whenever you're able to leverage those opportunities and bring millions of dollars to the city from other people's money or the state, that's a good thing. And so that then buoyed the construction of the tallest office building in downtown that hasn't happened in 75, 80 years. And so those are the kinds of things that when you get people all kind of pulling in the same direction, that you're able to accomplish.
And that's when you feel proud?
I feel proud of our community. I feel proud of the staff that makes up these results. I feel proud of the council making tough decisions, that they're making decisions that are the best for the community and taking the hits and standing up there boldly taking those hits and saying these things are things that we've ignored, that we've neglected for years, and now they're making those tough decisions and they're seeing the results. So they make those tough decisions, I think, boldly and strongly and with a lot of pride. So yeah, I see that pride in their eyes, and I'm proud of that.
That's interesting. That's one of the reasons why I'm excited to talk to you about a lot of things, but one of them is kind of like the improvements, the accomplishments from the city. And I'll tell you, at least from my perspective, I notice that sometimes most people just focus on the negative, right? Maybe just focus on the things that we're not doing as good as we should be doing, perhaps. But then we don't look at the big picture to see where we're at, the things that we are working on. Of course, there's a lot of work to do, but when you have kind of like people that only highlight El Paso wrong, the things that is wrong with El Paso, like, wait a second, of course, yeah, maybe we need improvement on that. But overall, I'm proud of El Paso. I'm proud of the accomplishments. I see the difference myself, 5-year, 10-year difference. And I'm like, wow, what you're talking about. And that's why sometimes this is a recurring subject in the podcast, is that a lot of times people have this mentality of there's nothing to do in El Paso. That's why people are moving out. And I'm like, wait a second. That's kind of like you're reflecting your situation. But the fact is that there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of progress in our city. There's a lot of great people doing great stuff. Definitely, we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but that's one of the reasons why I'm excited, because I want you to share like the accomplishments and things that we have done, and also the things that we're still missing and that you're working towards.
So first of all, you can't get to the small things or even the big things. And a lot of people argue that you have to take care of the big things before you do the little things. And I think it's the opposite. You have to do the little things right, and you have to do them over and over and over. Good habits, and good habits get you good results, and then grow bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of how you push out those results. So one of the things that 7 years ago, before we had a strategic plan, which, by the way, the city never had a strategic plan in place ever in its history, and it does now. We introduced that in the fall of 2014. The city council approved that in January of 2015, and we've been working that plan ever since. And that plan is very, very results oriented, and it keeps the organization of 6,000 plus souls very goal centric and centered on having kind of a beacon of what direction we need to go in. For example, our vision statement is El Paso will have safe and beautiful neighborhoods, and we can measure that. You can measure the safety, and that's the reason why we've added more police officers in the budget, and that's what's increased the budget. We can measure the vibrant regional economy. That's the other part, safe and beautiful neighborhoods and a vibrant regional economy. The safe and the beautiful neighborhoods part, we've got a development in the north part of the city, the first master plan community development, master plan housing development ever in the city of El Paso that we did with the Foster Group. And that was a combination of what we did with the work we did there, and also the Angora Loop. That was something that was much needed in the Northeast as well. So we did those two things in combination with one another. We've been able to put money aside, $10 million each year for streets. 7 years ago, you had $0 set aside for streets on an annual basis. Yes, you had them in bond issuances, and that's why the city has sold so many bonds, because it has neglected those kinds of priorities like streets, like police, like fire. And so those kinds of things we had to put in place. So when we talk about getting those things in order, we've saved over $220 million over the last 7 years. We've been able to bring in $285 million. I mentioned how we did the hotels, and those are millions upon millions of dollars. That one hotel development in the plaza was $23 million. It's $24 million for Camino Real, which is now Paso del Norte Hotel, and it was $7 million for the Marriott Courtyard. So when you add up all those numbers, you're looking at over $50 million just in that one development itself, in terms of how we were able to bring that from outside the city. When we renegotiated the El Paso Electric deal, we were able to bring back $205 million to the city starting in 2030. And we were also able to do $7.5 million between now and 2030, over the next 10 years. So we've been able to position ourselves for the future so that we can get more things done, so that we look at the future today. We don't do a budget by budget year every single year. We look out into the future and plan for it, and you have to plan for it by the types of things that we mentioned, having those type of savings. What has that enabled us to do? We have more streets that we've done. We've got better parks now. We've been able to put soccer fields in place on the east side. We built the Beast of the East in the far east side that's been neglected. The city council put in front of the voters, and they passed the public safety bond that's going to put an East Side Regional Command Center on the east side, something that's sorely needed for the east part of El Paso, that's been growing exponentially and faster than any other part of the city and has been ignored this whole time. A lot of people don't know this, but 20 years ago to today, we're barely where we were numbers-wise with police officers 20 years ago.
Really?
That's ridiculous to let the numbers fall that much. And people wonder why the response times were so high. They were so high because the number of police officers was lacking. So a lot of those areas, whether it's streets, whether it's the number of police officers, whether it's the East Side Regional Command Center, whether it's fire stations being put in place, and yes, the quality of life that people have asked for, now that they've got spray parks that they can go to. They've got water parks that they can go play in. And these are things that families had to drive 6, 7, 8 hours to go participate and utilize some of these kind of facilities, and now they can do that in their own backyard. So those are the kinds of things that we now have in our city, not just in downtown, but all parts of the city.
Exactly. And we'll get into the technical side. I definitely, and I know that our audience also wants to know, as far as when it comes to leading those projects, what's step one, step two, what happens when there's some hiccups around along the way, of course, and we'll get to that. I'm just very interested to know about Tommy Gonzalez, how he got here, because if you can talk about one of your, coach's wife in high school told you that you would make a great city manager when you were in high school. And that, to me, I'm like, wait a second. So does this mean, how was Tommy like in high school, or what do you think that was?
So I told you a little bit about my background, how I grew up very poor, and how I had to beg my mom for me to play sports. So I was good in sports. It was kind of my outlet. I really enjoyed it. I mentioned I was the only brown spot in a lot of other people that are a lot lighter complected than me working at the city of Lubbock. Well, when I was younger, I was the lighter skinned person, and everybody else was black, and I was brown, and I played amongst my friends who were African American, and I was dumb enough to think I was as good as they were, and I was in a lot of cases. I was very good in football and basketball, baseball, track, and that's all I did when I was little, is just play outside with them. When I say them, my friends in the neighborhood, and they happened to all be African American because I lived on the east side of El Paso. I'm thinking El Paso, the east side of Lubbock. So that really kind of has made me who I am. I remember giving a speech to a bunch of young people here in El Paso, and I said, you've heard that story about baseball's been very, very good to me? And I said, well, football's been very, very good to me. And I said, if it wasn't for football, I wouldn't be a city manager. If it wasn't for football, I wouldn't have finished my college degree or gotten a master's. I said, if it wasn't for football, I wouldn't have met my wife and married her. So, football's been very, very good to me. And so I kind of made that joke with, I forget which baseball player said that, but I said that to these kids, and I told them all the things that I was able to do as a result of playing football. I was even able to save one of my best friends' life that I grew up with. Whenever he and I were 10 years old was the first time we met in YFL in Lubbock. His name's Alvin, and he hit me. He played on defense. He got up, and the coach said, because we were like pushing each other, and the coach said, "Y'all want to fight? You want to fight?" And bring boxing gloves. Anyway, he was a lot bigger than me, and he was a big, gentle giant. And I was like, "Yeah, I want to fight." And he was like, "No, coach, I don't want to fight." And so anyway, we were best friends ever since that time we met. Well, he and I went to college together and played football together. So about 2 years ago, he was going through a really bad time. He had divorced his wife, and he wanted to kill himself. So he called me, and I talked him out of it. So football has helped me save my best friend's life. So football has really been the cornerstone of who I am, in terms of giving me opportunity to even be in the military. Had I not hurt my knee, I wouldn't be in the military. So when you talked about the city secretary in Lubbock, who was married to my coach in high school, every time she'd see me, whether it was in high school, she'd tell me that I'd make a great city manager. I didn't know what a city manager did. I went off to college. Again, she'd see me at different events. She'd say the same thing. I tore my knee up. I went off to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I came back after the deployment. She told me the same thing. So I got out in the early out program, and I was going to go work for a bank. I was actually interviewing with a bank, and that's what I was going to do. And I was thinking, I'd work my way up in the banking system. And she got me an interview at the city of Lubbock. And I got an interview, and I remember sitting across the desk from the city manager. His name was Larry Cunningham. And he said, so what do you want to do? I said, well, and keep in mind, I just got back from Desert Shield, Desert Storm, having 90 pounds on my back, out in the desert, sweating it up, 125 degrees, pretty bad conditions. So I come back, he's in an air-conditioned office. He's wearing a white shirt like you with a tie, buttoned down, drinking his coffee. It's pretty cold in there. It's air-conditioned. And so I just got back from Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and I'm interviewing for these jobs. And I interview with him, and he says, what do you want to do, when you grow up? What do you have in mind? I said, well, I think I want to do what you do. It doesn't look that hard. Exactly. If only I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have asked that. I wouldn't have said that stupid statement to him. Anyway, he encouraged me to get my master's. He says, you have to go get your master's. You can't let that stop you. And, I was a brash young man, and I was like, well, do you have one? And he says, well, no. And I said, well, why do I need one? He goes, you need one, he said, because you don't want to be told no in a job in the future because you don't have your master's. He said, I wish I had my master's. So I got my master's because he told me to. And I remember seeing other people that had theirs, and I'm thinking, that guy, I'm as smart as that person. If that person can do it, I can do it too. And I tell my kids that now all the time. Look, that person is this. You can do that too. And so you have to motivate yourself. So I did. I motivated myself that way, and I started working there. And when I made working in a city competition like football, that's whenever I got good at what I'm doing. I made it a competition where I'm like, I want us to be the best. I want us to, whether it's the best at saving money, the best at bringing in new revenue, the best at bringing in things that we haven't had before, whether it's the best at doing strategic planning. And then we do a lot of benchmarking. We compare ourselves to other cities, and we compare ourselves to other organizations. And that's the reason why when everybody was criticizing us and saying that, we were the most infected city on the planet, not just in the United States, on the planet, in the world, and how we had the best rollout according to the CDC and Rockefeller Foundation, that we were the best in the nation. That was a proud moment for our staff and for our council for being that critical, for stretching us, for forcing us to be that good. And now, we have 81% that have one dose in their arms and 70% fully vaccinated. When you say, well, how does that compare to the nation? Well, the nation barely got to 70% with one dose, and we're at 81%. We were at 70% about 6 weeks ago. And in terms of fully vaccinated, we're at 70%. We're ahead of the nation, and we're also ahead of the state, and we're ahead of every large urban county in the state of Texas. So I think that when you have these best practices in place, you just have to stick to them, push hard, have confidence, motivate others, inspire them to do more than what they're expected to do, and you can get these results. And the beneficiaries is our beautiful community, because we get to protect it. We get to make it better, whether it's from a health perspective, from a safety perspective, or from an amenities perspective in terms of quality of life, and making that better for our community as well.
Interesting. We're definitely going to talk about COVID, past and also present and future, especially with what's going on. I'm definitely going to ask questions on what the current situation is and what are some actions that you guys are taking already. But I want to go back to the skills that this person in high school saw in you. That she said, because she could have said, "Oh, you're going to be rich when you grow up." Okay, I get that, right? Maybe your passion around making things good, whatever that is. But she was very specific that you'll be a great city manager. What are some of the skills that she saw?
I have no idea. I really don't. Looking back now, I think in this position you have to be able to communicate well. You have to have confidence. You can't give up easily. You have to have stick-to-itiveness. You have to have intestinal fortitude. You have to have mental toughness. You have to be able to get results. You have to be able to work hard. Have a strong work ethic. You have to be able to do things regardless of what's happening around you. I think that growing up the way I did, that helped shape that tough environment for me. The military reinforced that. Certainly football did as well as sports. There's just so many lessons that we get in the military, that it reinforces the things you learn from your parents when you're little. You also get a lot of life skills and life lessons and leadership lessons, both in, not only in playing on the football field, but on the hard court, in track and baseball, and again in the military, being placed in situations where it's very stressful, very tense, very little sleep, maybe sometimes not as much food, but I was used to that as a kid. So being placed in those positions and having to lead people, not just reading it in a book, but having to lead people under those conditions, it's not easy. And so you have to learn as you do, and you don't have sometimes a chance for a second chance. And so sometimes being good at something is extremely important. I mean, as an officer, you have to go in, and as a 22-year-old, I had a platoon sergeant who was 57 years old that reported to me. What am I going to know more than a 57-year-old? So you have to be good at your craft. And I didn't want to be one of those dumb second lieutenants like you see in the movies. You have to know your stuff. Then you have to roll up your sleeves, work right alongside with them. And you continue to do that in city management. I remember not only here, but in other cities, I'd go out and replace pipe with the water department that reported to me in Irving. I remember going out and doing the same thing with the electric company that reported to me in Lubbock, Texas. I've gone out and picked up trash. Here, you don't pick it up; it's electronic. But in Irving, you actually pick trash up, with your hands, and you just picked it up through in the back of the garbage truck. And I did those things, and I didn't want any attention for it. I did it so that I could be reminded of, how fortunate I was to work in that air-conditioned office. Whenever I was sitting across that city manager and saying, "Hey, I think I want to do what you do. It doesn't look that hard." I wanted to be reminded, of where I came from and how, I'm very thankful for what I do, and that when you go out and you talk to them and with the people that work for you that do those hard manual labor jobs, you learn things you don't get in a report, the nuances. I mean, whenever I went and did that, I didn't know back in that city that we weren't paying for their steel-toe boots. So they were buying cheaper boots so they could pocket their money, because they'd get a stipend, meaning like $75. And so the steel-toe boots that you needed to get were $150. So what they do is they get cheaper boots that were like $40, and they keep the $35 or whatever it was. So I said, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're just going to buy them steel-toe boots, because we had a lot of accidents and a lot of workers' comp issues. So it was things like that you learn that might be insignificant to some, it might be minor details, but those are the type of things that you pay attention to, that you have to pay attention to if you're going to lead other people. Maybe that's what she saw. As a quarterback in high school, I always did the little things, and I think she saw that, and I think the coach told her that. I was the only one working out in the summer all day, and whenever we'd run sprints and two-a-days, everybody else would be throwing up. I'd be standing straight up thinking, why is everybody throwing up? I was too ignorant to know that everybody was drinking. I didn't drink in high school. I didn't drink in college. I didn't touch alcohol until we lost our twins.
Uh-huh. As you're telling me this, of course, a lot of things. Football played a big role, definitely, right? But to be honest with you, not every college or high school football player has this mentality, this work ethic as you do, right? So it definitely has to be. I know your family, your dad played a big role. What can you talk about? Well, can you give us a little bit of details of how was it growing up? What are the big lessons that you learned from your family, from your dad, especially?
Well, I'm gonna try to keep it together. Every time I talk about my dad, I get very sentimental. My mom was tenacious. And if I had to compare the two, my dad showed us through he was modeling behavior. He was very sympathetic, empathetic, very never said a whole lot. When he said something, you listened. And I remember talking to someone about how to become a better leader, and they were talking to me about that. And I remember I had a conversation with that person, and I said, I thought the other day about how can I be a better leader, and the answer that came to my mind was, what would my dad do? In terms of making me better. Because if I treated a situation like he would treat a situation, then I'd handle it much more effectively than how I would do it myself, just with just my own thoughts and feelings about it. So both my mom and dad taught me a lot about having a vision and having a plan and executing the plan, and how you treat one another and executing that. And that's exactly what we do in our organization with the vision statement that I mentioned that we've got, the strategic plan that we have, and then the values, how we treat one another. So I learned that early from my mom and dad and didn't even know it. And as far as what modeling behavior he taught me, I know every time I got in trouble when I was a little kid, and you know, y'all have heard this phrase in Spanish, ben cabezudo, stuff like that. And so anyway, you know, when I was a little kid, 6, 7 8 years old, you know, I'd be a little kid. You know, I'd fight with my sisters and, you know, just be a little kid. And so I remember when my mom would say to my dad, ve habla con tu hijo, porque, you know, how I acted that day or something like that. And I remember my dad walking in, and this is him working this hard job at Eagle Pitcher. And he'd have soot on his boots, and he'd have, you know, he'd be all dirty, and he'd come in, and he needs to shower, he needs to eat, and he's going to his second job. So he's got to come talk to me. So I feel this big. I mean, I feel like, golly, I wish, you know, my dad didn't have to do this. And so he comes in, he goes, and instead of spanking me, you know, I wanted a spanking. You know, I'd feel like, just get it over with, spank me. He'd come in and he'd say, Hito, ¿para qué hiciste eso? You know, and man, I felt this small. That's all he had to tell me. I felt horrible. My mom, she was a lot more, you know, tenacious. But my dad, he just handled things with a kid glove very gently, but boy, did it hurt. And so just because I had so much respect for him. And, you know, because he modeled a strong work ethic. I remember Saturdays he had another job, and then on Sundays you'd think he's going to rest. Well, he was an usher at church. So he'd be the first one there and the last one to leave. So I'm thinking, you know, and then he'd get these pamphlets on these orphan kids, and he'd give the little money he had to that, because he gave all the checks to my mom. So whatever little money he had that he didn't use up for, I don't know, for whatever, he would give $10, $20 to these charities of these like orphan kids. So, I mean, my dad, he just modeled just superb behavior as a man and as a leader. And so I'm just very thankful for him.
Nice. I want to talk about when he said, no lo digas, hazlo.
Yeah. That's
something that you, of course, practice on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And when you're also helping your own leaders, that's something that I'm sure you bring up. Before you answer that, something that I wanted to share with the audience is that I know Tommy from the gym. I used to go to the gym that you work out, which is Sun City Athletic. And before knowing that you were the city manager, I mean, you can tell you're always pushing me around, encouraging me that, hey, make sure you do this, make sure you do, like, finish your exercise, your sets, your reps. And I'm like, wow, you know, like, the older man, of course, he's pushing me, he's, like, motivating me in a way that I feel excited. Every time that maybe I didn't want to go to the gym the next day, I'm like, oh, what will Tommy say? What will Tommy do? And, like, am I going to be able to see Tommy, like, in 2 days? But, like, oh, I didn't come because I just couldn't wake up. No excuses, right? And what the point I'm trying to make is that I'm a firm believer that how you do anything is how you do everything. Mm-hmm. And it's not only like this persona that you're putting for city management or the things that kind of like what you follow or your career, whatever it is. This is you 100%.
Yeah, and it goes back to my mom and dad. And my dad used to always say, "No lo digas, hazlo," and now we have that on the walls in the city hall. And I remember I had someone give me a pen the other day, and it had that on there, and I just, you know, was tearing up and bawling. I mean, it was just a very, very thoughtful gift, and it's something, like you say, that you need to do on a daily basis. And I know that people who don't know me personally, they see a facade, they see a certain individual, but my dad saying that, my mom being the way she was, it really has shaped who I am. And I do believe in not having an excuse and taking responsibility, being accountable. And I tell my folks that, we want to not use the word try, because it gives you an excuse to not get something done. That doesn't mean that if you're young, you're a little kid, and you're telling the little kids not to try. No, I'm not saying that. But at the same time, you either get it done or you don't get it done. You either threw out the trash or you didn't. You either do something for your kids or you didn't. And that same goes for your wife. I think you have to be committed and loyal to your wife, to show your kids how to treat your mother, how their mother gets treated, so that they model that same behavior whenever they have a relationship. So I think that's important. And so, to your point, no lo digas, hazlo, that's a good message for anybody. And not having excuses is a good message for everybody. And we're, I think, the best country on the planet. I know a lot of people are saying a lot of things about America, but they get the right to say that. They have the right to say that. They have the environment to be able to freely say that and not get shot when they walk out after they say whatever they said. And in other countries, you can't say that. So I always tell people when they have a lot of complaints or concerns, we choose to live where we live, and there's a cost to it. Whether there's a cost of paying for it, whether you're paying for your phone, paying for cable, paying for streets, or whether you're paying for freedom through the people who have served and the people who are still serving, unless those things are just words, they don't mean anything to anybody. And I think they should mean something to everyone, because what's life about if it's not about having values and having plans and executing those plans and leaving a footprint and leaving a legacy and leaving an example for your kids and for others. We got to be the best we can be while we're here, because we're not going to be here that long. When you think about it, 30 years is going to go by really fast. 30 years has already gone by really fast for me. I've been doing this for over 30 years. So another 30 years is going to come and go. Then I'm going to be 84 like my dad. That's when he passed. So you could say I got 30 years left. You could say I'm in the third quarter. And so I want to play the third quarter really, really well. And I want to play the fourth quarter really well. And I want to finish strong.
Yeah. Great perspective, Tommy. Let me ask you, how difficult is it? Is it difficult to make sure that you instill the same values, that you're raising your own family, your kids, your sons, kind of like the same way that your dad was able to do with your family, with your siblings? Do you look back and sometimes wonder if you're doing a good job? I know you are, but I'm wondering from your perspective, do you sometimes kind of like, am I doing a good job? What would my dad do for like specific situations, scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I've made a lot of mistakes as a father. But every day I'm putting my very best effort and doing the very best for my kids and for my wife, so but we're not perfect. So because you want the very best for them, the very best for your wife. Yes, I'm like, well, man, I could have done that better. Maybe I should do this more. And but the modeling behavior that my dad taught me, I do that every day for them. The kids see that. The kids see that I get up and they know how old I am, and we know how old they are, and I do more than they do at the gym. And now my older one's catching up, which I'm very proud of, but I remind them I've got a lot of surgeries, a lot of injuries, and I'm just glad that I did what I did in front of him 4 years ago before I had my first shoulder surgery, because I was doing a lot of weight, and kids nowadays, they have to see it, otherwise, you're just talking. So he's seen it. And it's important for him to know that he had a father that had a strong work ethic, that had some accomplishments in sports, so that he can work hard for that as well. That's the only reason. And I think that emulating those kind of behaviors for them is important. So you have to provide an example. It's not easy, because as a father, your kids, they see everything. I tell people all the time, whenever they used to always say, well, he's a good leader, this and that. I said, no, you know what? I didn't start becoming or knowing what a leader was till we started having kids. And they see everything you do, and they're like, well, Daddy, why are you doing that? Texting and driving as an example. Well, I'm at the stoplight. Well, but Daddy, you're still driving. You know what I mean? So it's all those kinds of little things that they remind you of, so you have to be an example to them all the time. And my wife reminds me all the time. She goes, don't do that, because the kids, they do everything you do. So it's very tough to be a good leader when your kids are always watching. But you know what? That happens when I'm in the position that I'm in now. My folks at the city, they're always watching. So it's no different than whenever I was in the military or whenever I played quarterback in college. Everybody's watching, and everybody's got something to say. I remember playing in a game, and I had like 6 touchdowns. I had no interceptions, but I threw the ball away a couple, two, three times, or I got sacked. I had a really good game. I remember coming down to the stands, and my wife and I got married in college. So I'm getting off the field. I had a great game. And my wife's tearing up. I said, "What's wrong?" And then she said all the things that they said about me. And I said, "What do you mean? I had 6 touchdowns. I didn't get picked off." "Yeah, but they said you took the sack because you wanted to protect your numbers and all this kind of stuff." So that was a very good lesson, in that it doesn't matter how well you do, somebody's going to always have something to say. And that's where mental toughness comes in. That's where the strength in your character and believing in what you do is important. That's why I gave you that example about when we were the most infected city on the planet and everybody was attacking. Are you going to shrivel up, or are you going to get stronger? So we had a lot of confidence and faith in what we were doing, and we didn't go the state way or the national way. We went our way, and the numbers speak for themselves.
Definitely. And by the way, just to close out this topic, I can tell you, I know Sagan personally, I don't know your other son, but I mean, you can tell that you're doing an amazing job. He's such an amazing young person. He's 20 now, 18, 19?
He's 19.
He's 19,
yeah.
But you can tell he has the work ethic, very respectful individual, and you can tell that you're doing such a great job. So I just want to acknowledge that.
I appreciate that. It means a lot. He reminds me of my dad.
Does he?
Yeah.
Why?
And then my other son reminds me of my mom.
Why is that?
Well, Sagan's very compassionate,
Uh-huh.
and Sager's very tenacious.
Okay.
Sager's got a temper on him, and he's very tenacious. It's my mom. And Sagan is just very compassionate, and both of those qualities, you can comes from my wife as well. My wife is more compassionate and more sweet. She's not tough, or she's not like aggressive or tenacious like Sager is. I mean, she can be, but she's very sweet, and so they both have those qualities. But that's what the kids remind me of whenever I see them, and whenever they're doing what they do.
Nice. Every time you talk about your wife, you can tell that you're in love with your wife.
Yeah.
You respect your wife. How important has she been to your success overall?
She means everything to my success. I mean, she's been there throughout the entire time. I don't make a move without her, and she gives me advice all the time. And I tell people all the time, be very glad I'm running the city, not her, because she'd get y'all in shape a lot quicker. She's a lot more direct and to the point. She's a very smart lady, and I think she's beautiful on the outside, but she's even more beautiful on the inside. And that's a tough combination, because I mean, you can't beat that. I mean, she's just a wonderful human being. I'm very lucky.
And the importance of her role, and what I'm thinking is, like, when you have difficult days at work, I'm sure you had a handful of those.
Oh, yeah.
How important the support, knowing that you have that, of course, support at home to be able to, okay, well, let's do it again next day, right?
Yeah, I can't thank God enough for, giving me Sandy. I mean, she's everything. She found me. I mean, it's a long story. Maybe I'll tell you that sometime. But she found me way back when. But God didn't know who she was, and she kind of found me, and which I'm glad. And so she made it very easy for me, because how could I say no to meeting someone like that? But she has been there for us. When I say us, me and the kids. But like, we're not in Lubbock because of her. We're in El Paso because of her. I had offers in Florida, in California, in North Carolina, and she didn't want to go there. And so when this job came up, and they offered me the job, she goes, "Yes, we'll go to El Paso because it's in Texas," and it was still close enough for us to be near family in Lubbock. And so we're here because of her.
I don't know if you recall this conversation that we had, but I remember this vividly, because I don't know why we were talking about people marrying young, right? So my take on that is, make sure you marry after 30, 35, you push it because that way you're able to travel, not only travel, but open up your perspective, get different perspective. And we were having that conversation. And my question to you was, what do you regret marrying at such a young age? And I remember your answer was no. And then you explained why. And I'm like, I remember saying, well, of course, if you hit the lottery at 21, right?
Yeah.
But I would also wanted that. But there's a high chance, please don't marry young, that's my opinion. There's a high chance that that's not going to happen to a lot of people, especially because at that state of mind, most people, their brain is not developed, and also maybe their perspective of the world, of other things, is not as it would be at 30 or 35. So I just remember that conversation, and that's where I like.
Well, it goes back to my father. I mean, he had a lot of respect for my mom, and I remember when he'd come home, he'd give her the check, and he would look to her for guidance. But he was also a man and led our family. But he was very respectful to my mom and gave her respect and what she meant to the family. So I learned that young. And so my wife's very petite but very strong woman, and so she knew what she wanted. So when we met, it was 19 when I hit the lottery is when we met. And I remember one summer, the following summer after we had met, I remember this as if it was yesterday. She was playing in a soccer tournament. She was really good in soccer. She was playing indoor soccer, and she had like 8 goals. It was ridiculous. She was like a video game. And so she comes up to me, this beautiful young lady, and she's a little sweaty, which made her even more pretty at the time. And so she comes up, she gives me a hug and kisses me, and I was just got back from college, and I remember her telling me, I know what I want. What do you want? Because I don't want to waste my time. And I thought, my gosh, she's, that's pretty direct. But at the same time, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I want you too. So what are you talking about? And so she was that kind of direct, and it worked. And she looked the way she did, and I felt the way I did about her. And so her being that direct just helped everything along. And so that's how it happened.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Let's continue to talk about your current role as the city manager, right? El Paso is the 21st largest city in the United States with a budget of over $1 billion a year. What's the toughest role, or the toughest part of your role as a city manager? What's the toughest part of your job?
The most challenging part is communicating and messaging on the things that need to get done and what it takes for those things to get done, and then communicating that to the public and making sure that the council is aware of that. That's probably the most challenging part. You might think, well, yeah, but that goes without saying. Yeah, but it's like what I told you before. Until people know the root cause of the problem, then you can just get lost in the problem, in the complaints, in just, oh, we can't do this, or why is this like that? And when we go back and show the council and the community and say, look, streets have been neglected for decades. Police, why are we at the numbers we are whenever the city grew, whenever BRAC came, when Fort Bliss started expanding? At the same time, the city was reducing the number of police officers. Why would they do that? So when you tell them the neglect occurred with the streets, the neglect occurred with police, so the tie back is, all we're hearing is complaints from the public about the streets. Oh, of course you are, because you've neglected it all these years. When I say you, not this council, just over time. Mm-hmm. The public safety, the response times are so high. Yes, they are, because the numbers are down in the number of police officers that you have. Why wouldn't they be down? So when you start at the root cause and then you say we're going to attack that problem, now we have $10 million on an annual basis for streets, in addition to the bonds for streets, but the $10 million that you don't have to issue debt. This year, in this year's budget, we put $20 million for streets. So you show, hey, that's the root cause. We're attacking that root cause. On the police officers, we're up 145 positions. We're barely today where we were 20 years ago. When you can put it in that perspective, it gets their attention. The other thing we said, we put codes under police. Why? We're painting the codes vehicles like police vehicles. No, they're not police officers, but that gives you more of a presence in the community. We also have trailer overwatch systems that are video cameras that we put in large gatherings. We have more video cameras in downtown and other parts of the city where it's more considered in areas where we want more video cameras to capture footage of different things that might occur that are of criminal nature. So we've got those kinds of things in place that we didn't have before. We have a citizen patrol volunteer program that we're initiating this fall. So again, you start attacking the problem and start showing people those things, and that doesn't get across in just one quick soundbite. There's a lot of quick sound bites that people can say, well, I don't like this, and boom, that's a sound bite, versus what I just explained. That's not a sound bite, but we're attacking the root cause of those kinds of problems. So that's probably the most challenging part, to get that across. So we have to come up with things like, hey, we're better, we're safer, we're cleaner, and then talk about how are we better. We're better because we have better amenities throughout the city, like the amenities I talked about. Like we now have facilities on the east side of the city. We didn't have them before. We have downtown development that occurred with the state money. We've redeveloped the Cohen Stadium area by putting a water park there, and we're going to put the police headquarters there. And we're working on developing that and bringing more developers and more business to the Cohen site. So when you can then start talking about how you're addressing those problems, you start saying how we're cleaner, how we're better, and how we're safer through these kinds of programs.
Of course, I'm not knowledgeable in this subject, so hopefully you can walk me through. Am I hearing that maybe the council, the mayor, right now we'll talk about the role that the three of them play, but it sounds to me like everyone has different agendas based on maybe one wants to be popular with whatever they're hearing from the citizens, from the community. Maybe your agenda is, hey, let's take a look at what is maybe the problem that we had for the longest time. Is that kind of like what I'm hearing, that sometimes everyone has, I'm not going to call it different agenda, but maybe the priority is not the same at all levels? Is that what I'm hearing?
No. See, that's my point, in that it's difficult to explain exactly, the message, the type of things that are happening in the city and the improvements that are being made. We have all coalesced to work together on a strategic plan. That strategic plan has 8 goals. And in those 8 goals, it talks about the things that we want to improve in the city. And they help us with the vision statement. And the vision statement is El Paso will have safe and beautiful neighborhoods, a vibrant regional economy, and exceptional recreational, cultural, and educational opportunities with a high-powered government. So we then, through the strategic plan, do everything we can to make those things happen, so that when we go and look 20 years down the road and you look back, what did we accomplish? Better streets, better park amenities, better libraries, better ballparks. We have now soccer fields that we didn't have on the east side. So we attempt to have that plan all kind of encompass what our goals and objectives are.
How is the city able to prioritize like what's needed? Because again, maybe someone or a level government can say, the streets, it's raining a lot, we need the sewer system. And then how do we know it's downtown? Sometimes I'm sure you can't do everything at the same time, budget-wise, or maybe even the manpower for it. How's the process of saying, we do need to work on funding the police so we can have more police officers. At the same time, we need to work on the streets, or we also need to work downtown. Walk us through the process of making sure that we take care of priority 1, 2, and 3.
That's a very good question. So what we do is we have resident surveys. So we ask the residents through surveys that we put in place. We also have what's called the council request process for all 9 of them, all 9 members, the mayor and 8 council members. And so every request that comes in through their district, we capture that every month, every day, every week, and then we capture that data for the end of the year. So we use the resident survey, we use the requests they get in their district. We also have a budget chime-in survey. So we hear that's more anecdotal because that's not a survey, and neither is the CR process. Both of those are anecdotal, but they pretty much match up to the residential survey. So we use all those 3 mechanisms for the inputs that we get. We also have community meetings with the districts, and so we use those inputs as well. We capture all that data, and that provides the direction for us in terms of what we do. We then put that in a strategic plan. We present that to the council. That gets integrated into the budget process, and then those are the things that are then our priorities. And our priorities are streets, public safety, health, and quality of life, for like parks. Those are the top 4 that we hear from the resident survey. So those are the top 4 areas that get funded, most of the funding in the budget.
Nice. This process that you're talking about, was this process in place before you?
No.
Okay, let's talk
No,
about
it
how this
wasn't.
process became, because I didn't know about this, and
Yeah.
it definitely makes sense as far as
Yeah.
having input, not only like from the mayor or council or yourself. It's obviously this is what we need based on different
Exactly.
avenues, right? But
Exactly.
talk about the process, how we got to that process.
So it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about the strategic plan. The city did not have a strategic plan before 2014. In 2014, we put one together with council input, and then council approved it in January of 15. So that was the initial beginnings of, again, having a plan. I talked about my parents, talked about they had a plan, they executed it. We didn't have a plan, so we needed a plan. So we reinforced that plan by having residential surveys that we do. So those surveys are sent out to the public. We get those back. So that's an input. That's really the basis behind it. We then overlay that with the CR process. Those are the requests that each council member and the mayor's office gets from the community. So we then capture all that data. We've been doing that for 6 years. So we have all that data of 6 years of not only the resident survey, but the CR process. We then also have a chime-in process where people get to chime in on the budget. So we've been doing that for 5-6 years. So that data we use too. We then have focus groups that we do with that chime-in process. We ask you, like if you filled one out, we'll ask you in the survey, are you willing to be on a focus group? You say yes. So then we have focus groups. We then have community meetings that we do in districts. We get those inputs. I just did one on Friday at the Northeast and got those inputs. We took it a step further, and I didn't mention this earlier. We also have a student budget advisory committee. We go out and teach 400 kids throughout the city our budget process. Then they present that budgeting process to the council. And so we give those 400 some odd kids an opportunity to give us inputs. Guess what? Those 4 priorities I mentioned, they have the same 4 priorities. They're in different order, but they have the same priorities, which is kind of interesting. So those 4 priorities I mentioned, public safety, streets, the community's health, and I think because of COVID, that really kind of surfaced to the top. And then park improvements. Those are the top 4 that get the most attention.
It's funny how, at least talking from my perspective, of course, it's funny how sometimes the easiest thing to do is just complain about something, but not understanding, not knowing the things that we can do as community to also help whichever situation we're complaining about.
Absolutely.
That's a big takeaway, at least for me, because again, it's not only about complaining, about seeing numbers. Let's talk about your race now that we're talking about this subject.
Sure.
Again, the social media that I follow, when it was announced that you're up for a raise, 5%, putting you close to the $400 or at $400,000 a year. As far as again, this outlets from the news, not every station or channel, but from social media, Instagram, from Facebook, they hear $400,000 for Tommy Gonzalez, and you can just imagine the comments. I don't know how aware you are of those negative comments that they don't understand why someone should be earning that, or maybe that money should be going towards something else. And in my mind is that, you know what, that was me with a limited mindset before. Not understanding, not doing my research as far as what you bring to the table. And again, this is my opinion, and I'm not saying this because you're here, of course, but if we want to hold the talent, meaning you know, you can easily go to another city, and if the council, the mayor, and like because you have a scorecard, you have a progress report, if that is working, you know, give this man $1 million. Well, I'm not saying that, but what I'm trying to say is that now that we understand the value that someone brings to the table, now we can give your opinion. If after I know all this, you know, I still think, okay, it is my opinion, but at least it's an informed opinion of everything in the table, not only judging, or again, why is Tommy Gonzalez, why Tommy Gonzalez deserves a raise. Right. Can you expand on that? And what are your thoughts on maybe the criticism that comes from that alone?
Right, absolutely. So the way those contracts work is that you negotiate those with the cities you choose to go work in. And I know when I worked in Irving, you know, we saved the city $82 million over the course of a 7-8 year period. We've saved a lot more here. And we did that a lot in Irving through Lean Six Sigma practices, and we do that here as well. And so I know that I remember one time that when we were negotiating, I told the council, just don't pay me, this is in Irving, don't pay me a salary, just pay me 10% of the savings. And they said, no, because that would be $8 million. I said, okay. So then we negotiated what we negotiated, and I got a lot of notoriety or people writing about what I made there. And here, I negotiated a contract here, and it is what it is. And I've saved what I've saved in terms of getting our team together to save the dollars. And I mentioned earlier, we've saved over $220 million. We brought in over 270 new dollars. Those aren't tax increases. Those are dollars from the outside that we didn't have before. So, in terms of, and I've said that here too about a percentage, and said, no, we don't want to pay you a percentage of the savings or percentage of the new revenue. And so we negotiate a contract. And so those contracts are negotiated for services that are rendered. And so it's a contract that I have with the city. Now, I mentioned before, I grew up the way I grew up. And I remember there was one person as I was growing up in the system in city management who told me, don't ever be, he goes, you don't ask, you don't get. And I always tell people whenever they come in and negotiate with me, I said, don't be afraid to negotiate what you think you're worth. I mean, all I can say is no, or you might be surprised and I say yes. And so I think that's important for people to hear and for young people to hear. And we do live in America. And, what I was raised to think and believe is that if you put in the hard work and if you do your best and you hopefully will be successful, you have the opportunity to be successful in America. I know that there's a lot of people that have different thoughts on different folks that make whatever they make. I know I don't make near as much as a lot of other people that do a lot less in this community and have a lot less of a budget. I'm not going to name who they are, but they have a lot less of a budget than I have, and they have a lot less people than they manage, and they make more than I do. And so it's interesting, but my position gets focused on quite a bit. And I accept that. I mean, it comes with the job, and so I don't mind answering the questions. I remember having a conversation on Friday with a community group, and I said, "Look, you can ask me whatever you want." I said, and I'm going to answer every single one of the questions. So you might not like the answer, but I'm going to answer it. I'm going to stand here and answer every one of your questions, and I did. I didn't leave till I answered every question.
At the end of the day, of course, there has to be results delivered in order for us to put ourselves in a situation that people see our value. And in your case, again, can you talk a little bit about the report card? I know there's different components of how you specifically get evaluated on. Talk a little bit about that, so maybe someone not familiar with that, we can also try to understand the process.
I get evaluated on the strategic plan, on the 8 goals that we have. I get evaluated on how we manage our organization, not only how we do strategic planning, but how we develop leaders in the organization, how we focus on the workforce. A lot of people don't know this. We have town hall meetings with our workforce. We have employee town hall meetings. We have employee surveys. And then when I get that information, we make adjustments. We have put in a Shape It Up program for our employees that they can earn up to $150 a month to help offset their health care increases. It also reduces the health care costs for the city, because if they're in better shape, they're not going to go to the doctor as much, and it's going to reduce our overall liabilities for the city. So that helps the taxpayer. So those are programs we didn't have before. We didn't have training programs in leadership. Development. We didn't have training programs in Lean Six Sigma, which is standardizing deviation and eliminating waste. That's helped us save millions of dollars for the organization. Case in point, we were able to, just like something real simple, in that when we had lines replacements for voice over IP, which is going to a new system. Before I got here, we still had all these landlines, all these phones in people's offices, and yet you didn't need it. You could do the same thing off the computer. So once we did a Lean Six Sigma project on that, we saved $600,000 a year. So I paid for my salary two times over, because when I started, I was making less. So that paid for my salary 2 times over in just that one project. So we did things like that we hadn't done before. So those are the type of things that we do in our organization. So not only focusing on the workforce and strategic planning and leadership, but also customer focus. We were able to do irrigation repairs in parks. Instead of it taking 2 days, now it takes us less than 2 hours to do an irrigation repair. We used to have the fire station, have the fire trucks go to the garage, and it would take them a day, sometimes a day and a half, to do just general repairs. Now the garage, the fleet department goes out to the fire station. So that saves in overtime, so it saves in fuel, saves in better customer responses whenever we have a fire. So we put those type of things in place that we didn't have before. So that customer focus, better service for our customer, better service for the people who do the work for our customer. Organizational focus. Also, we focused on knowledge management and results. So those areas, along with the strategic plan and the values of the organization, is what I get evaluated on. So those are all based on the results that we have each and every year.
Nice. The only thing that I encourage people to do before, and not only on this subject, but any subject, before we throw in the hate, the complaints, or the we don't understand. And again, I remember vividly this comment that someone said, how can this person get so much? He doesn't even live in El Paso, he lives in Dallas. And I'm like, okay, that was very strange.
But that's funny, because we've lived in El Paso for 7 years.
Trust me, what I'm thinking is this person.
I don't think I'd be able to show up at 6 a.m. with you to work out every day if I didn't live here.
And that comment, he was very vocal, and he lives in Dallas. But again, maybe you do have that opinion. Maybe after knowing all your accomplishments, or the things that you have been part of, once you understand that, maybe I can still say, you know what? Nope. My opinion is that maybe he should get paid less. Okay, that's a respected opinion from someone.
Well, I would tell you something.
But understanding.
As far as people like that, I tell you what. I look at what football players get paid, and I played football in college, and I won one of those big contracts, and I'm like, that person isn't worth $160 million for 4 years. I say that all day long. They haven't won a playoff game. They haven't won a Super Bowl. That person's not worth $160 million. So yeah, I can see people saying what they say, but in terms of results, in football terms, we've won some playoff games here, and we've gotten to the end. We're close to winning a Super Bowl here, and so we've made some progress here in a lot of areas. Very proud of the progress we made. I mean, Sun Metro 7 years ago had a $27 million hole in their budget, $27 million deficit, meaning they were in the hole by $27 million. They're up $12 million today. So that's a huge turnaround. The fund balance was rated when I showed up. We've increased the fund balance, which is our savings account, by $41 million. I mean, that's significant. We have a rate stabilization account for $16 million that we didn't have before. That helps us offset some of these challenges that we're seeing. So last year we didn't do a tax increase. This year we didn't do a tax increase, and we're decreasing the tax for seniors and the disabled this year. So when we're able to have those kinds of results by the work that we do as a team that all work towards accomplishing the strategic plan, those are results, those are playoff wins that that we didn't have before, that we're working on having today.
I'm glad we talked about that.
Yeah, me too.
Senor, let me ask you this. My house taxes, I don't know what role you play. Maybe you play no role, maybe you do. Why do they keep getting really high? I live in Horizon, by the way. They're, in my opinion, they're crazy high. And when I look at also my friends, my immediate surroundings, that's something like that. It's a subject that we talk about a lot, which is house taxes. What role you play first? And why are they increasing year over year, aside from everything that we're working on as a city?
So the Central Appraisal District is the one that assesses those valuations, not us, and they're a byproduct of the state, not the city, and so they do that. So now when the values go up, the values have been going up by 12, 14, 18, 20% in other cities for a long time. It hasn't so much here. Now the last couple of years that's been the case. It's gone up dramatically. COVID has exacerbated that problem. COVID has caused used cars to be bought for more. Like if you have a used car, you're going to get top dollar for it. The cars are not selling at, you can't get a deal anymore because that chip that goes for the car, they can't get it. So now they have a low supply. So low supply, high demand. And I think that's what the housing market has done. And so that part of it has increased the values of our homes here, and that's what's causing this exacerbation of increased costs. I know that we were going to downsize here. We lived in a bigger house when the kids were here, and we were looking to downsize. So we downsized, and we were looking. Everything was through the roof. We just got lucky to get a home that we felt like was reasonable, but the pricing has gone up because of COVID. And you would have, people scratch their head. Why is it going? Why did housing go up? Why did cars? Why are they selling like hotcakes? COVID had an impact on those type of things. Now the values here overall for us went up 4.2% in value. That means the same property, like let's say this is worth $100, that went up 4.2%. So for all the properties in the city, we got a average increase of 4.2%. I have heard the stories of some people saying mine went up 15%, went up 30%. Well, by law, you don't pay more than 10%. You're only going to be charged 10% if yours went up that high. You can also challenge those values by them. In terms of what role we play, so when we look at those dollars, we guesstimated that the value increase would be 4.3%. It came in at 4.2%, so we didn't see a value increase. We did see a value increase in the TERS because it didn't come in as high. So there was $3 million there that we then assigned to streets. So that's where that money went towards. In terms of how we can help the citizens, last year during COVID, we did not increase the taxes. This year, we did not increase the tax rate, and we lowered it for seniors and the disabled. So that's how we can help. That's what kind of role we play.
Nice. I'm glad I asked that. That was more of a personal question, but I'm sure that's in a lot of people's mind as well.
Absolutely.
Nice. Senor, let's talk about, we talked a little bit already about the public perception of you, of your roles. How difficult has it been? Of course, with your experience, you already have that everywhere you went, but how stressful is it, like when you have people giving you pushback? I don't know, maybe not as specific to, in this case, a salary, but maybe different projects that they don't agree with you. How do you deal with stress? Talk to us about that process.
The process of people giving feedback on projects that are getting done out there, it's been pretty positive. A lot of what we've been doing is based on those surveys that I mentioned, whether it's the residential survey that's done throughout the community, whether it's the chime-in process, the CR process, whether it's the Student Budget Advisory Committee, all those different ways that we get information from the public, we've been working on those, and then we then categorize that and prioritize and fund them, and we've been getting a lot done. So even like this last event that I went to where we presented information, they had a lot of good questions, and some would consider some were tough. I didn't think they were tough questions. I think some people were very frustrated because of the question, some of the things that they were talking about, but I answered all those questions and gave them facts and information about the things that they talked about. They talked about streets. I told them about the $10 million we now have each year, that we're going to put $17 million and we were going to recommend another $3 million. So I answered that question. We talked about taxes. I answered the question like I answered the question for you just now. So I answered that part of it. And I talked to them about public safety and how we've increased that. They wanted to know when certain projects would be finished, and I gave them the answer to that, summer of 22, for the two questions that they asked with regard to those projects. So we don't get complaints about what's getting done. We get complaints they want more done. And so what I explained to them, that costs money. And so the fact that we've been able to do that without increasing the taxes for the last 2 years, that's significant. I also tell them, how we compare with other cities in terms of cost of living and overall tax rate, and how that impacts El Paso and how that impacts other cities, and how we're in a better position than other cities. And then they say, well, we don't want to hear about other cities. We live here in El Paso. I said, I understand that, but we have a very good situation here in El Paso, and we've improved a lot of the areas that have been neglected over time. So those are the type of things that we discuss in those kind of meetings. They're very productive, very fruitful. I think that the public asks very engaging questions, and we give them those kinds of answers to those questions because they deserve it.
Nice. Let's talk about maybe the projects that have not worked the way that you envision, the times that maybe a specific idea, process, project did not work the way you want it. Can you give us some examples of that and how you were able to deal with those situations?
Well, when we do projects, we get community input. Mm-hmm. So we actually engage the community. So we don't really have situations where projects don't go the way we want because it's not what we want, it's what the public wants. So when we engage the public and get that feedback and then we execute on that, it's a very productive process and good results come out of that. I know that we gave an update to the council today on the public improvement program that the community passed in these last couple of years, and the council was very pleased with it. They had a lot of insightful questions, and we had good answers for them. So we get a very good feedback when it comes to how the projects get done.
Nice. Now, what did you learn specifically when you were the city manager of Irving, Texas, that you brought immediately to El Paso?
The process that I mentioned with strategic planning, the way you can engage your organization with Lean Six Sigma practices, how you can save on doing things more efficiently. The fact that we engaged more of our leaders, like for example, over in Irving, we had what was called the 100. We had 100 managers throughout the city. We were about 2,100. When I left, we were 1,800. We reduced the workforce by 10%. And we increased the service levels by double digits across the board. Some people didn't like the fact that we reduced the workforce, but it saved us money and we were able to lower the budget every year. So when we put that in place, one of the things we did, like I said, we do employee town hall meetings here in El Paso. We did them there in Irving as well. But one of the things we did, though, is we were interviewing different layers of our organization. A lot of people don't do that. And we did that in order to get a better understanding of how to lead the organization. So those 100 that were middle managers, we asked them how many of them wanted to promote, stay in their position, or be part of a bigger team to get better at what they do. And we kind of got a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. In other words, 1/3 wanted to promote, the other third wanted to stay where they were at, the other ones just wanted to get involved in other programs within the city but didn't want to leave. We kind of got the same feedback here. So we did that here in our organization, and that helped a lot because it helps communicate with that middle layer. And our middle layer here is the 500. We have 500 that are in that middle management category. So I communicate with them via email. We have them on an email string, and that communication helps lead the whole organization because not only do I speak to the layer that reports to me directly, but then I speak to that middle management group on a variety of messages. So I learned that in Irving. We apply that here, and it's worked extremely well.
Nice. While you were there, you got criticized by running an army-like management.
Yeah.
How would you describe your management style now?
I think it's very similar in that when they said that about me, I said, you should be so lucky that we run this place like the Army, like the military, because the military spends billions of dollars on leadership. And as I mentioned earlier, you get placed in positions of stressful environments and you have to lead people into different situations. And so, yeah, I think that that's a compliment. I don't see that as a bad thing. So that's how I responded to that. And that's how I would respond here. If someone would accuse me of running it like the military, I would say that that's a compliment. However, I think that in terms of that type of observation, I don't think that people say that now, even though we do run it a lot like what the principles are in the military. We get a lot of inputs, a lot of feedback, and I don't think you can say that about the military that you ask everybody for input. But we do that. We ask not only in town hall meetings, we ask them for input, but the middle managers, like I mentioned, we ask them for input. And then we take actions based on that. We ask the community for input, and we take actions based on that. So I think we do a lot more listening. And I think as I've developed in my career, the older that I get, that's an area that I can say that people can say we do a lot of listening, and then we take action based on what we hear, and then we just execute off of that whole thing that I talked about that you said earlier about my dad, no lo digas hazlo, meaning get it done. Get it done. And the difference between what my dad said and what I have to do in this position is that you have to then talk about what you get done. I don't like doing that as much. I'd rather just get it done and people see it. But here you have to message and you have to articulate what gets done, or otherwise people don't see it, don't hear it, and they're not reminded of the fact that, look, we were here 20 years ago, we were here 7 years ago, and now we're here today, and look at all the adjustments and improvements that have been made. You have to remind people about those things that have been put in place.
Nice. Senor, how are you able to support your leaders, see the same vision, make sure you develop them as leaders as well? How have you been able to do that so they can also share the same mindset, kind of like the eyes on the long-term goal,
Yeah.
and then kind of like the process? Can you give us a little bit as far as how you do it, how successful you've been, and what are some things that you can still work as far as to get us all in the same playing field as far as the goal and everything else?
Well, the first and foremost thing that you have to have in place is a vision for the whole organization, and they all had input in it. They had input, the council had input. So that vision statement that I mentioned, it's for our organization and what we see for our community. We want to have safe neighborhoods. We want to have beautiful neighborhoods. We want to have a vibrant regional economy. We want to have exceptional recreational, cultural, and educational opportunities. And we want a high-powered government, meaning we want a high-powered organization that knows what it's doing, has a good plan in place, it's executing off that plan, has good systems and processes, has methodologies in place like Lean Six Sigma, and gets the results, and then reports out on those results. So we are all on the same page. So that's how we get them all on board. We're all rowing in the same direction because we all have the same vision.
When developing leaders, what are maybe the one thing or two things that you focus on the most?
They need to be strong communicators. They need to be charismatic, because you can't lead unless you can communicate well and you can get people to follow you. You have to have a good plan. You need to know what a good plan looks like. You need to be trained in certain areas like Lean Six Sigma, or the criteria that I mentioned in strategic planning, leadership, workforce focus, customer focus, and knowledge management, results, organizational focus. Those 7 criteria, you have to be really good at those things. So those are the type of things that we find extremely valuable in our leaders. And we talk about them leading, not managing. We tell them anybody can manage, very few can lead. And I said, we just want leaders. So if you're not going to lead, we don't want you here. We just want leaders. We want people that will lead others, that will look at what resources they have or don't have and work like the Dickens to get that for them. Case in point, I know that 7 years ago when we started this strategic plan, I know that a lot of people were complaining about parks. Well, they didn't have the equipment that they needed, so we bought that for them. Pothole repairs, they didn't have pothole repair equipment. I know we went from 12,000 potholes a year to 76,000 potholes a year. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens by listening to your people and getting them the resources that they need. So we give them and show them that example, no different than our parents, and then we expect them to do the same thing with their kids, meaning in their department. So it starts from home, and you bring that, what you learn from home, to work, and you teach others, and you want to develop others because you develop others and you have them lead other people by taking care of them. And that doesn't mean you protect them. That means you take care of them by giving them what they need to be successful. And then their success becomes your success. And then that has a ripple effect. So that's the most important thing for us in developing leaders.
Nice. Thank you for that, Senor.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that dynamic of the city council, the mayor, and yourself. Can you tell someone like myself that maybe not very familiar with the process, but what role does each play on a project, on an initiative, on something that the city's working on? The ideas can come. I know you talked a little bit about the projects and the surveys, the community, and all that, all those layers. But talk to us a little bit about the dynamic that each of the roles play, and a little bit of how, again, for someone like me that we don't fully understand the process, can you describe that process for me?
So the mayor and council serve as a board of directors,
Mm-hmm.
and the mayor serves as the chairman of the board,
Okay.
and you have all of them that are board members on that board. And they champion different initiatives in their district and or across the city. So they've been incredibly helpful in championing certain issues throughout the city, and it's our job to give them the tools they need for them to be successful. So we give them the background, the information, so that they're able to share that with the people that they lead in their district that ask questions of them. But they very much serve as a governing board to the recommendations that we bring to them. But all the things we bring to them are based on the strategic plan that is fueled by their direction, is fueled by those surveys that I mentioned. And so all of that is put together, and that's given to us as kind of our guiding light. And then we work on that, and everything we bring forward to them that they vote on is based on that strategic plan and based on the areas that they champion in their communities.
Can you give us a specific example?
Cohen is a good example.
All right.
You had that district representative really pushing for us to do things there. So we presented different options, and council approved those options. And then we presented different funding options. Then they approved those options. So now you have a water park there, and now you're going to have a police headquarters there. And then you have another district member, like in District 2, where we're going to relocate the police headquarters, and they want to redevelop that site. So she's championing that issue. So we're making those things happen based on their overarching guidance on things that they want, that what they say they want, those two things are within the strategic plan. So it's something that the whole council says they want. So it's a very symbiotic relationship, and you have to work closely with the board, in this case, with the council, and then with us in order to get things done. But in terms of the day-to-day, I'm charged with the day-to-day execution of what they want to get done, and I serve at their pleasure, meaning the council as a board.
Okay, in that specific example, how about the mayor? Like, did he had anything to do there? In that
It's
example?
the same situation.
Okay.
In that the mayor and council serve as the governing board, so they champion certain initiatives that they want to see happen, but all of it comes within a strategic plan, and the council has to vote on it. They vote on it as a body, and then we execute off of that. So it's very much a governance structure from which they serve a policy area, and we serve on the operations side.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's talk about coronavirus. You already talked a little bit about how it was managed, right? Talk to us about some of the things that we were put in place to follow that process. What were some in your action plan? Step 1, step 2, step 3, when we had the situation again back in last year.
So it was very chaotic for the entire world and the country whenever that occurred. Right off the bat, what we did is we put in a cross-functional team in place, and what that means is it's a multidisciplinary team of leaders. So we had about 11 or 12 executives that we put in charge of a variety of things. One we put in charge of testing. One we put in charge of code enforcement, the enforcement of the rules that were put in place. The other one we put in charge of communication, and so on and so forth. So we had these 11, 12 areas that we charged them with in order to attack the problem from a comprehensive standpoint. We even had a section for businesses and recovery of businesses, for rental assistance, and so on and so forth. We had to make it comprehensive because it wasn't just one thing. That virus attacked us as a community. I mean, it hit our pocketbooks, it hit our psyche, it hit our living rooms, it hit everything. It hit our hearts, it hit our soul. We had people we lost, friends, family members that have passed. So it hit us in all directions. So we put this team together in order to address all these areas all at the same time. So we were having these very lengthy presentations to the council because they had multiple questions on a variety of things. And so initially, the first meeting, I think the longest, it was like 11 hours. If I'm remembering correctly, it was 9, 10, 11 hours, and then it got down to 8 hours, 7 hours, 6 hours. Then it was a consistent 4 or 5 hours. Then we got down to 3 hours. And then towards the very end, when we were having more success, it got to quick updates. Like now we give updates and they take about half an hour today. But we still give those detailed updates for council to know what's going on. And as I said before, at one point we were the most infected on the planet. We came out of it with the best vaccine rollout in the entire United States, which I would say the world. And we're not saying that. The CDC said that, and Rockefeller said that. And our mayor was able to speak at an event where we were featured as the best, us in Madison, Wisconsin. And the things we were talking about, we were miles ahead of them. So that's why I say I think we were the best. They said that we and Madison, Wisconsin were the best, but I think we were better than they were because our mayor came back very enthusiastic saying, we were talking about all these things and they weren't doing any of those. So it was very successful in terms of how we were able to put that initial team together, and then at the end of the day, the type of results we got. So today, 81% have at least one vaccine and 70% are fully vaccinated, and we need to get to 75% to be at herd immunity. How does that compare to the rest of the world or the state and the nation? At the national level, they've barely got to 70% with the first dose. We've been there for over 6 weeks, and a second dose. So we're like double digits ahead on both those areas, on single dose and second dose, and not only at the national level but at the state level as well.
Of course, the end result was a positive one. Of course, a lot to talk about there. But why is it that El Paso got there to begin with? I know the plan after that, we were able to overcome that. But what happened? Who dropped the ball? How the ball was dropped that we got to that situation to begin with?
I think the ball dropped when the virus hit the country. And so I think that's when the ball dropped. And
From government, there's nothing that we can say, and maybe we could have followed at that time a different process?
I think that at that particular time we did follow a process. We put a team together that hit all those different functional areas, and it was what it was. I mean, you had people that wanted to still get out. You had, it's tough to corral any people, in any part of the country. And we also have the border to contend with, and we have a synonymous, a synergistic kind of symbiotic regional flavor here, and we didn't have the same type of instruments in Mexico that we do here. There was a variety of factors. I think that we only have so much control over what we could do and not do. I think we were very aggressive in the beginning. And I also think that we had to follow state guidelines as well. And we, at the time, had our governor that thought certain things, and I think the local folks thought another. And we had to marry those two up because, if we go against the state, that could mean state funding for El Paso, and it could hurt us even more. So there was a lot of issues like that we needed to work through. So it was a combination of a lot of things. And so it was what it was, and we accept whatever responsibility we have for that.
Okay, let me ask you on County Judge Ricardo Samaniego. As you know, I own a small business. Again, very confused. I'm sure a lot of people got confused when the mayor said one thing when we had that situation, which it seems everything's clear now. But at that point, okay, so what role does he play and what role does the mayor play? And at any point were you also part of that as far as maybe providing advice, maybe guidance? Talk to us about that. What role, first of all, going back to the County Judge Ricardo Samaniego, what was the role that he played there and why was that issue going on?
In a state of emergency, the county judge has a final say.
Okay.
However, if the governor is directing a certain guidance, that's what needs to be followed. So that's what we did at the local level, at the city level. We followed the guidance from the governor. And we also supported the judge as much as we could. And so we worked very closely with him as well. And in terms of our guidance was that we have to follow state law. So that's what happened there. It's that simple.
Okay, but you think there was an issue when we had the situation on miscommunication, or it was just that two individuals were very passionate about how to handle this?
There was not a miscommunication. It was a disagreement.
Okay.
And that's the long and short of it. You had a governor that said a certain thing. As a municipality, we followed that, and the county judge disagreed with that. And I respect that. He disagreed with that because he was very, as you said, passionate in his views. And so we supported the governor, and we supported the county judge, and we supported our mayor at the time. And we just had to work through those issues, and they disagreed. And we then had to look at what we needed to do, and we needed to follow state law based on the legal recommendations we were given.
Thank you for clearing that for me.
Yeah.
Senor, what's the current situation? I'm not very familiar. Hopefully this episode ages well about the Delta variant with coronavirus going on right now. What is the current situation and what is the plan? Is there a plan already as far as what would happen if X number of, new cases?
So the Delta variant is here now, but we have a low number compared to other communities. Our infection rate is lower than other communities as well. Our infection rate is 3 per 100,000, where the state's at 25 per 100,000 and the nation's at 23 per 100,000. The problem is we're at 3 per 100,000, which in the numbers, what that means to us, we have 1,500 people that got infected as opposed to 500 2 or 3 months ago. So the numbers, they are what they are, but we have a lot less people than other cities and other parts of the country. So what we're stressing is that people wear their masks, people social distance, and people wash their hands with sanitizer as often as possible. So going back to the basic protocols that we had in place before, and just be careful. And if you've been vaccinated and you're around other people, just don't get so touchy-feely with them, and just keep your distance, wash your hands, and wear your masks as often as possible.
Okay. What's your personal opinion on where we're heading with that? Again, this is just
I think our community is on the upside of that. I mean, we're at 70% fully vaccinated. We're at 5% away from being at herd immunity. And, that's the recent guidance from the CDC. I mean, that could change. They could say, well, we want you to be at 80 now or 85. But we're heading in the right direction. Our community has responded extremely well. Very proud of El Pasoans and all of us here in terms of how we've stepped up to this virus. And we're in a very good position right now. We still have to be vigilant. We have to be very, very considerate of others and be careful about our surroundings, and just go back to the basics of what we put out early on with protocols relative to socializing with people and keeping your hands clean as often as possible, and covering up as often as you can.
Nice. Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm. Staying in the topic of events that, of course, crisis that we have had in the city, I definitely want to talk about August 3rd of 2019. Today's August 3rd as well, the 2-year anniversary. Do you remember, was it like in that moment when it happened? Of course, I mean, there were so many things, but first of all, what is it that you recall? What was the city thinking at that moment? Right. Can you walk us through as far as what happened in those moments?
Well, it was definitely a hate crime. And when I first got the call, my heart sank into my stomach and just really felt, very sad. And my heart went out to the families who had lost people. It demonstrated that we're a region. It wasn't just people from El Paso, it was people from Mexico and even people that were visiting at the time. And again, it demonstrated what we're all about, in terms of we're one region, and that we shop like that, we eat like that, we drink like that, we play like that together, and that's what it showed. And what the first thing I thought of is that this isn't going to keep us down. We're going to show what we're about. And the way this community responded, other people in other cities, whenever they're throwing water on police officers, our community was bringing water to police officers. So the love, the care, and the fortitude and the characteristics that were demonstrated by our community, that character that you can't describe but you can see, we saw throughout our community that entire time. And I just want those 23 souls to rest in peace, and for us not ever to forget them, and to help their families as much as we can. And so when this community rallied behind and raised money for those families, we did everything we could for them and to show them the affection and the love that comes from a caring community like El Paso.
I agree. At a personal level, sir, even though you're talking about it already, how did it affect you? Of course, the least thing we expect from El Paso. I don't know if you share the same view or not, but when I first heard the news, I just couldn't believe it. This doesn't happen in El Paso, right? Mm-hmm. At a personal level, what were your thoughts? What were some of the things that was crossing your mind at that moment?
Well, a lot of people think a lot of these ill thoughts about El Paso. And the first thing I told people that were calling me, I said, well, this person wasn't from El Paso. They drove all the way from North Texas to commit a hate crime. So it wasn't someone here that did it. So if anything, we're a very peaceful community, very loving community. And I know right after the event, there was a football game that had been canceled between Plano and one of our schools in the YISD district. And I remember some council members calling me and saying they can't do this to our kids. And I remember that floored me. And so I said, no, you're right. And they were like, you need to call the Cowboys, because they knew, working in Irving, that I had a relationship with some of the senior executives there. And so I said, okay, I'll do the best that I can. So I called them for them to host this game at Frisco at the Star, because I thought we cannot show these kids a bad example on something so horrible, and then as adults show them how not to do this. And when you had adults wanting to cancel the game because of publicity or because they thought that our kids or our parents were going to do something to them, I don't know why they canceled, but it was all kinds of reasons like that. And I thought, how horrible of an example is that to show to our kids? And so why are we going to pour salt on this wound instead of doing something that maybe these kids will never forget in a good way and make something negative into a positive? So when the council members called me, I did call the Cowboys, and I didn't do anything. The Cowboys were the ones that got it done, and I was very grateful to them, and worked with Dr. De La Torre, who's doing a great job at YISD, and worked with him to get that game back on, and the game got put back on there. And so that's what I remember about how this community came together, and how we don't give up on our kids, we don't give up on our community, and we need to show a good example and show our character when things are at their toughest moments. I don't think that's when you shrink. I think that's when you rise and show our community what we're about, and show the rest of the world what we're about. And I think we send a message by doing that.
Very well said. What makes El Paso unique, especially when you compare, you have worked on other cities, right? What makes our city unique?
Well, we're on mountain time. That's one thing that makes us unique.
We're next to Juarez.
Yeah,
that's another.
Yeah. And yes, we're next to Juarez, and yes, we have 3 states, 2 countries, and we're one region. We have an incredible young, talented workforce. That makes us unique. We have, I think, we have incredible sight lines, in terms of sunrises and just how beautiful the clouds are with the mountains in the backdrop, the trail systems that we have. That you don't have just in any city. And so we have a lot to offer that, we're still in Texas. I mean, we're the only city that has mountains in Texas. So, I think those are just some of the qualities that make us extremely unique. But I think at the very end of the day, our people are what sets us apart. I talked about we have a very, very young workforce. But we have a very can-do attitude. And I know you talked about there's a lot of people that have complaints, but there's a lot of people, just like there are in a lot of cities throughout America and throughout the world, how they don't say a whole lot, but they put their nose to the grindstone and they're working, just like my dad, my mom did. We have people like that here, and they're very positive, and they're getting a lot done. You're always going to have negativity, but those people need to be reminded, look, man, we're not going to be here on this earth that long. Don't be negative your whole life. Work on something that's positive, make yourself better, make others around you better. And what can you leave behind as a positive for others? I mean, that's what we should be thinking about as a community.
Thank you, Senor. Do you think sometimes, again, at least on my conversations, we get criticized on maybe El Paso has a small town mentality, meaning like we don't see the big picture, the progress, like the things that are the hard work that it's going to take. Do you share that? Do you not?
I think, I've heard in other cities, not just El Paso, that they're fighting the brain drain. I've heard that here. I've heard that small town mentality in other cities. And yeah, some people have said that here. But I think, we're a big city. We have big city problems. In some parts of the city, we operate like a small city in a good way. So I think we're a little bit of everything. I mean, we are a big city, and I think sometimes we forget that we're as big as Denver. People don't realize that. Or Detroit. People don't realize that. And that we rival a lot of other cities that people scratch their head. I didn't know you were that big. Because, we have a lot of geography in El Paso, because it's a big city in terms of the geography that we command here. So it's a large geographical area, and I think we have a lot more people here than people know that we have here. So maybe that's why they say those kinds of things. But no, I think that the city's operating not only in the community, but as an organization, like a big city, and we've got a lot to show for that we are a big city.
Gracias, Senor. Closing out our conversation, which I have enjoyed a lot. What's in the future for El Paso? Where do you see El Paso going in 5 years, in 10 years? Talk to us about that.
Well, I know that right now our council has been identifying a lot of needs that we have in the community, as has the community, and doing more streets. So I know that's a very basic item, but I see more streets in the future. I know that we are also growing with the types of ways we're changing how we do policing in terms of introducing new ordinances. We're working on that to introduce new ordinances in order to make it safer for our community. But in terms of the big things that people want to see, what's the next big thing? What's coming to El Paso that we don't have? I think we would like to still get a resort hotel here in El Paso, something that's going to bring people here. I think that higher paying jobs is a very high priority. I see that in our future. We've already increased wages by 17%. That is a huge priority. We're working on a couple of job relocations here from other cities that would be a big shot in our arm. So that's a big priority for us. I see the development of Uptown, which is across the interstate on the other side of downtown, that's across the street from UTEP. That's developing more and more. That's been a priority for us for several years. I see a build out at the airport and making that more of a advanced manufacturing industrial park. I see that as something that we're looking at doing in the future. I see more development on the east side relative to making improvements to the traffic patterns and street improvements in order to reduce congestion, because I know that's a big issue on the east side. So those are just some of the things that we see in the future of El Paso, but we're going to also continue doing more surveys and getting more input from the citizens and see what other kinds of things that they put in front of us that are important and priorities for them.
Nice. How about your personal future?
Well, I love El Paso, and I know that my contract goes through 2024. I'm focused on completing that contract if at all possible, and so that's what my future holds so far. And so I do this on contract basis. So when we talked about my salary, this is on a contract basis. So it's not like I have a permanent job, and so I have to negotiate what I can negotiate, because it might not be something that I'm here forever. And so those are some considerations I need to make and have as it relates to my family and my livelihood as well.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit more at a personal level. Like, do you see yourself retiring in Costa Rica? Like, is there any goals that you have? Talk to us about that. What do you see? Again, forget about work now. Tell me, in 20 years, I see myself drinking margaritas all day long. What?
No, I don't see that. I don't see myself retiring.
Okay.
I don't. I see myself working and attempting to make this city better and other cities better if I end up in another city. But I'm committed to El Paso, and I just don't think that. I think if I retire, that's when you start dying. I think, and even people that I know that are retired, some of them are active doing part-time stuff, and so I think I'm always going to do something. I always got to keep my mind active in order to, you need to do mental gymnastics so that you don't have your brain deteriorate either. So I'm always going to be challenging myself, and I want to get my kids through the MBA law school at Tech. They have an MBA law degree program, and so that's what I want them to do. And so I see at least another 5 to 6 years that I need to work to get them through school. Then after that, I'm sure they'll get married, they'll have kids. I want to be one of those grandpas that's jingling money in their pocket, so I need to work to have money to jingle in my pocket to be around for my grandkids.
Thank you for sharing that. I hate to prolong this, but I know that at least I'm going to have regret if I don't ask. It's for tips on becoming more accountable, more disciplined like yourself. And I'm sure other people will also benefit from your knowledge. What are some advice that you have for people wanting to become better leaders, better people at whatever they do? And again, I personally struggle with holding myself accountable, having that discipline, right? For the most part, I have been okay, but I want to get that much better, right? And I know it requires that much more of effort, right? What are some recommendations, some advice, anything that you can share?
Well, I would recommend that you put a strategic plan together for yourself. I think people should have a personal strategic plan. What do they want to accomplish in the next 5 years? We did that for our 500, in our organization, and also for the people on the organizational chart. We said, look, you need to map out a course for your next 5 years. What do you want to do in the next 5 years? So when you sit and think about that, and then you tell them, and then after that, what do the next 10 years look like? When you really sit down and think about that, that's the best thing you can do for someone else. And that will hold yourself accountable, because then you start thinking about, what can I do in the next 5 years so I'm in this next position that I want to be in, or that I'm in this house that I want to be in, or I'm in this kind of shape that I want to be in. So you can have a personal strategic plan that you want to do, not only from a mental standpoint, but a spiritual standpoint and a physical standpoint. So I always tell my sons those three things. You need to be good at mentally developing yourself, spiritually developing yourself, and physically developing yourself. So I would say those two things that I would tell people that would be good tips: to have a personal strategic plan like I've described, and then remember those three things: develop yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually.
Nice. Do you then break them down into specific tasks that you have to complete within a month, or do you give yourself also timelines, deadlines?
I find that if it's almost like eating. If you're forced to be on a diet, you're not going to stay on the diet. And as a dad to my kids, as an example, if I tell them to do something, they're going to do it. I think oftentimes you have to motivate people and inspire them to do something. So you need to, whether it's physically or whether it's mentally or spiritually, they got to want to do it. And I think the first step is to have a personal strategic plan, because then they put things in front of them that they can accomplish. And you need to be able to accomplish the goals you put in front of you. You might say, well, maybe the goals are too easy. Okay, well then redo it. After you meet those goals, do another one. So that's a very good tool for people to be able to utilize something like a personal strategic plan, so that they then put goals in front of themselves that they can accomplish, and if they accomplish them faster, they can redo it. And then the three-prong kind of guidance about the spiritual and mental and physical part, they can go at their own pace. Some people have issues spiritually developing themselves. Some people have issues mentally developing themselves, or physically developing themselves. My sons, one of them's really good at physically and spiritual, but not so good at the mental. The other one's very good at mental, not so good at the physical, and somewhat good on the spiritual. See what I mean? You got to get good at all three. And I tell them, when you do that, you're a balanced individual, and then you can be the best person you can be, the best version of yourself, and then you can lead others. So that's what I tell my kids. I tell my organization that as well, in terms of those are the three things that are important as far as guiding points for them. But the personal strategic plan is what we're working on now for the 500. It's been very rewarding for them. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from our folks. And then I'm just constantly sending them messages. And I did a lot more when COVID was really at its height. Now I'm doing one every other month to the 500, sending them an email. And then sometimes I don't send them something. Like, I don't think I've sent them something in the last 3 months, because it's got to be something that's meaningful and that's useful to them. I don't just want to send an email to them just to send them an email. If it's something that inspires or motivates me, I share it with them, and yeah, that works the best, I think, for me.
Yeah, and it sounds like we also have to have an honest conversation with ourselves to identify what are my strengths, what are my opportunities, what is it that I need to work on, and then after that, of course, have a plan in place and, of course, execute on that.
Absolutely.
Nice. Senor, the last question that I asked all my guests, you have answered some of it. I'm very interested in your response. The question is, it's a two-part question. What is the one thing you love about El Paso? You cannot say food, by the way. And one thing that you would change or improve about our city?
The one thing, there's several things, but the one thing that comes to mind immediately are the good people that I've met in certain aspects of my life. You're one of those people. I think Shane is another one of those people. I think the lady that cuts our hair, she's another person. She's a wonderful, wonderful lady. Our neighbors, they're incredible people. They take care of us, and likewise us with them. So that's the first thing that comes to mind in terms of what do I love about El Paso. That just pops up in my head. So that's my honest response.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. As far as Because, there's good people, and I like good people. I know you're like, well, that's dumb or a very simple thing to say. Yeah, but I'm very simple. I mean, I'm very basic. And when you run into good people that are good-hearted and genuine people, you don't forget that. And so I really appreciate it whenever we run into good people, and then we're friends with them, and because they're going to be your friends forever. And we've been very fortunate here with the good friends that we've made here in El Paso. As far as what I would change about El Paso, I think that it's difficult to say, because I think that a lot of the things I would change about it, we're doing it at the city, and that is that we're looking more into our future, not so much just reacting. So I would say that we need to do that more and more. All of us do. And as a community, obviously anybody would want that for any community. So just being more proactive and looking at things out into the future, making sure that people understand that there's a rhyme and reason to what we do. The things that I mentioned about now having $10 million aside for streets, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? It's hard for people to disagree with it, especially when we say we never had it before, now we do. It's hard to disagree with having, and we're barely at the same number of officers we were 20 years ago. People are like, whenever I tell them that, they're like, look at me like, what? Yeah. That's why the response times 5 years ago, whenever that was that story, I don't know if you remember on KVIA about it took 3.5 hours for a police officer to respond to a barbecue, somebody was being robbed or whatever. It's because we don't have any officers. So it was very important. So it's a lot of those kinds of things that we're now more proactive about. We do things ahead of time, and we leverage, whether it's resources or dollars, to get things done. And I think we have lots of examples now. And so I think that's a beautiful story that we are able to tell now, in terms of we had neglect, look at what we're doing about it. Look how we're being proactive towards the future, and how we are looking towards our future today and not waiting and reacting when the problem gets here. So we're more proactive. So that's a sign of a large city. That's a sign of a big thinking city. So we're bigger thinkers now. We're more strategic, and we're more aligned with our community's needs, because we listen to them, and we execute better, and therefore we get better results. I think our community can see it. I think there's a lot of things our community should be upset about, of all the things that weren't getting done over decades in time. They should be upset about that, and they should hold us accountable. So absolutely, we've gotten better in those areas, and it's because we have a plan, and it's because we listen, we execute better, therefore we have better results.
Thank you, Senor. Any closing thoughts? Anything that you want to perhaps say? Anything else that we're missing, Senor?
I believe that we all have a responsibility while we're on this earth to make, whether it's, if you have kids, raise them right. I used to always say in Lubbock, grow them up right, raise them right, give them the tools they need to be successful, and know that you put them in a position to succeed. I think we then need to be able to do that when we work in our professions and develop others, and see how rewarding that is, and how that has a ripple effect, and how when you run an organization of this size and you're able to do that, then you're successful. When you're able to impact the 500 as an example, and see them lead the organization and do great things, then all of a sudden you have 20 things or 50 things or 100 things that are great things that are happening all the time. Then the results, they churn out faster. People wonder how we get so much done. I tell them, I said, it used to be the city could only do one thing, and then they lost their mind just doing that one thing. Now we do 289 things, and we do them all really well. Why? Because we developed our leaders. We've given them the tools that they need. And now you got examples like we used to have 12,000 pothole repairs every year. Now we have 76,000. That's a good and bad thing. It shows that we need more money for streets if you have that many potholes that you're repairing. But it also shows we got more efficient, more effective of doing that. So we have multiple examples like that, and I think that that's probably the best advice that I would give anyone, is work to develop others in order to have these great successes. Because when you develop others, all you got to do is sit back and see all of the success happen and all the results take place, and that's a very, very rewarding feeling.
Very well said, sir. Senor, once again, I just want to thank you not only for your time, but the things that you have shared. I have enjoyed this conversation a lot. I have learned a lot. Has opened my eyes to different perspective on a lot of things, and I just want to thank you again for everything you do, for your time, and again everything that you have shared.
Well, thank you for doing this, Ellie, because I don't know who does this for the sake of making yourself better, learning, and sharing knowledge and information with others, just because you're being good for no reason at all. I used to tell people all the time that my dad was good for nothing, and they were like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, he's good for no reason at all. He's just good. He has no reason for being good. He's just a good man, and he doesn't need a reason to be good. He's just good for no reason." I said that in a speech one time to honor my father. He's good for nothing, for no reason at all. He's just good. He was just a good man, and he had a tremendous impact on my life. And I miss him very much. And he was a great person.
Well, thank you again. I'm gonna stop now because yes. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Adios.